In 1993, a quiet compound in central Texas became the scene of one of the most controversial and tragic standoffs in American history. For 51 days, the world watched as federal agents surrounded a religious community known as the Branch Davidians. What started as a warrant to search for illegal firearms escalated into a fiery inferno that claimed the lives of 76 people, including more than 20 children. This is the story of Waco. Our story begins not with the siege, but with a man named Vernon Howell, who would later be known as David Koresh. Born in 1959, Koresh had a troubled childhood but found purpose in his deep study of the Bible. He joined the Branch Davidians, an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. In the early 1980s, the group had settled on a property outside Waco called the Mount Carmel Center. Koresh was charismatic and had an incredible ability to recite scripture. He quickly rose through the ranks. After a power struggle, he became the group's undisputed leader. He taught his followers that he was a messianic figure, tasked with unlocking the secrets of the seven seals from the book of Revelation. Believers saw him as a prophet, someone who held the keys to their salvation. To outsiders, his teachings and his control over his followers were deeply concerning. Life inside Mount Carmel was a mix of intense Bible study, communal living, and hard work. Koresh's followers came from all walks of life, from the United States, the UK, Australia, and beyond. They were families, single adults, and elderly people who believed they were part of a special community preparing for the end times. Koresh's teachings became increasingly apocalyptic. He preached that they would face a final confrontation with Babylon, his term for the outside world and its corrupt governments. As part of this preparation, the Branch Davidians began stockpiling a large arsenal of weapons. Koresh taught that they needed to be armed for the coming apocalypse. This accumulation of firearms, some of which were allegedly illegally modified, drew the attention of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or the ATF. After an undercover investigation, the agency believed it had enough evidence to obtain search and arrest warrants for Koresh and the compound. On the morning of February 28, 1993, the ATF launched a raid on the Mount Carmel Center. The plan was for a dynamic entry, a swift operation to serve the warrants and secure the compound. But something went horribly wrong. The Branch Davidians had been tipped off about the impending raid. A local TV cameraman had even asked for directions from a mail carrier who happened to be Koresh's brother-in-law. When the ATF agents arrived in cattle trailers, they were met with a hail of gunfire. The initial shootout lasted for about 2 hours. By the time the shooting stopped, 4 ATF agents were dead, and more than a dozen were wounded. Inside the compound, at least 5 Branch Davidians were killed, with several others injured, including Koresh himself. The failed raid marked the beginning of a 51-day standoff. The FBI quickly took command of the situation, establishing a massive perimeter around the compound. The world's media descended on Waco, broadcasting every development live. For the next 7 weeks, a tense and bizarre drama unfolded. FBI negotiators made contact with Koresh and other Davidians inside. Their goal was to secure a peaceful surrender. Early on, some people, mostly children, were allowed to leave the compound, but Koresh was unpredictable. He would promise to surrender, only to change his mind, claiming God had told him to wait. The negotiations were a complex psychological battle. Koresh would engage in long, rambling Bible studies over the phone, frustrating the agents who were trying to find a resolution. To increase the pressure, the FBI employed various tactics. They cut off the electricity. They blared loud music, sounds of rabbits being slaughtered, and Tibetan chants at all hours of the day and night to wear down the people inside. These psychological tactics were controversial. Critics argued they were counterproductive, reinforcing the Davidians' belief that they were being persecuted by the forces of Babylon. The Davidians saw the siege as the fulfillment of Koresh's prophecies, a final test of their faith. Inside the compound, conditions were deteriorating. Food and water were limited. The remaining children were living in a constant state of stress and fear. The FBI grew increasingly concerned about the welfare of these children, and this became a key justification for their next, more aggressive move. Attorney General Janet Reno, newly appointed to her position, was under immense pressure to end the standoff. After 51 days of waiting, the decision was made to use tear gas to force the Branch Davidians out. On the morning of April 19th, 1993, combat engineering vehicles began punching holes in the walls of the compound and pumping in gas. The FBI's plan was to gradually increase the pressure, forcing a surrender without a direct assault. They maintained that the gas was not flammable and was a non-lethal way to end the stalemate. For hours, the gas was pumped in, but very few people emerged. The FBI believed the Davidians were retreating into a concrete bunker within the compound. Then, around noon, smoke began to appear from several different points of the building. Within minutes, flames engulfed the flimsy wooden structure. Whipped by the strong Texas winds, the fire spread with terrifying speed. The scene was one of chaos and horror. The fire department was held back, fearing they would be shot at. The entire compound burned to the ground in under an hour. When the smoke cleared, the devastating human cost was revealed. 76 people inside Mount Carmel had died, including David Koresh. Among the dead were over 20 children. Only 9 people managed to escape the fire. The aftermath was a storm of controversy, questions, and blame. Who started the fire? The FBI and the government maintained that the Branch Davidians had started it themselves as part of a mass suicide pact foretold by Koresh. This was supported by audio surveillance from inside the compound, where some survivors reported hearing discussions about pouring fuel and starting the fire. However, many critics and surviving Branch Davidians disagreed. They argued that the FBI's actions had either accidentally or intentionally started the blaze. Perhaps the combat vehicles had knocked over lanterns, or the tear gas canisters, which can be pyrotechnic, had ignited something flammable. The debate raged for years. Multiple investigations were launched. The official government reports, including the 1999 Danforth Report, ultimately concluded that the Branch Davidians were responsible for setting the fires. The report found no evidence that government agents had started the fire or fired shots into the building during the final assault. Despite these findings, Waco remains a deeply divisive event in American culture. For some, it's a tragic example of government overreach and incompetence. A case where law enforcement used excessive force against a group of religious believers, however unconventional. The event became a rallying cry for anti-government and militia movements throughout the 1990s. The Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, for instance, was carried out on the second anniversary of the Waco fire, with the bomber citing the government's actions at Waco as a primary motivation. For others, the blame lies squarely with David Koresh. They see him as a manipulative cult leader who exploited his followers, stockpiled illegal weapons, and ultimately led them to their deaths. They argue that law enforcement was faced with an impossible situation, trying to rescue children from a dangerous and armed fanatic. The truth of Waco is likely somewhere in the complex and murky middle. It's a story with no clear heroes or villains, only a series of miscalculations, misunderstandings, and tragic decisions on all sides. It was a failure of communication, a clash of worldviews that escalated into an unthinkable disaster. 25 years later, a new television series brought the story back into the public eye, prompting a new generation to ask what really happened at Waco. The series attempted to humanize the Branch Davidians, showing them not as faceless cult members, but as individuals who genuinely believed in their faith and their leader. It also portrayed the immense pressure and internal conflicts faced by the ATF and FBI agents on the ground. The legacy of Waco is a powerful reminder of the dangers of demonizing those we don't understand. It forces us to question the role of government, the nature of religious freedom, and the point at which belief becomes dangerous. The fire that consumed the Mount Carmel Center on April 19th, 1993, left behind not just ruins and ashes, but also a set of haunting questions that continue to resonate to this day. What could have been done differently? And could something like this ever happen again? Thank you for watching. If you found this documentary insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Let us know your thoughts on the Waco siege in the comments below.